You open up to Genesis 1, verse 1, and we'll be reading through verse 27. And then there's a little bit of a passage in 1 Corinthians, which you may or may not get through. The word of the Lord. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. The Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the water and from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. And there's evening and there's morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. There's evening, and there's morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together He called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, yielding seed, each according to its kind on the earth." And so it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its own kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let there be for signs, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years. And let them be in the lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light to earth, and to rule over the day and night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, "Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the sky, of the heavens." So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters form, according to their kinds, and each winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, for the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth." And there is evening and there is morning, the fifth day. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kind, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds." And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Actually, let's read on real quick. Let's do the rest. So God said, "Let's make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in His own image. In the image of God He created him. Male and female He created them. And God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." And God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the earth, on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast on the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, to everything that creeps on the ground, everything that has breath, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. And God saw everything that He made, and behold, it was very good. And there is evening and there is morning, the sixth day. And then just skipping a little bit ahead of Genesis 2, which is a same creation account, but a different perspective. In verse 19, we read this. "Now out of the ground the Lord God had formed every beast of the field, and every bird of the heavens, and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called every living creature, that was its name. The man gave names to all livestock, and to birds of the heavens, and to every beast on the field. But for man there is not found a helper fit for him." Let's pray. Heavenly Father, as we come before you, as we contemplate your person, your character, who you are, I pray that you would just open our eyes to see how your actions and your words and your deeds, Lord, are amazing in and of themselves, but more than that, they give us a glimpse into who you are. They help us to see who you are and what you care about. And I just pray that you would enlighten our spirits to receive what you have to say this morning. Lord, I pray just that it would plant itself in our hearts and our minds and grow. And Lord, just that you would guide us in this, that you would help us to understand things beyond us. And Lord, I pray that you be on my lips and on my tongue, that you would speak to me and to those here. And Lord, that we would walk away with an increased appreciation for worship and for what it means and for what we get to be a part of. Lord, we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Back before I was born, although it was still on syndication, there's a show on TV called The Odd Couple. Featured two characters, two men, Felix and Oscar. There are not a lot of Oscars on the TV, but when you get them, they tend to be kind of messes. Oscar the Grouch, and now Oscar from the Odd Couple. If you know the dynamics between in the Odd Couple, it's two men, Felix and Oscar. Felix is very organized. He organizes everything. He has a plan. He has a purpose. Everything is orderly and in its place. Oscar, like many Oscars that I know, is more free-willing. You know, you stack something here, you stack something there. If you run out of room to stack stuff up there, you stack it on the ground. You know, like you can find a place to put stuff. And so my general organization is just to put stuff everywhere. And there's this tension in the show, sort of, you know, who is right. And what's funny as you watch it is you tend to identify with one or the other, sort of based on, you know, like you see a kindred spirit. And so as you watch it, you find yourself being like, it's weird, you're like, he's right. And it's all because it's you. You know? Like the one that is, you know, like that's set way over the top in the organization, he's wrong because you see yourself in Oscar, or vice versa. So there's this tension between organization and, let's say, spontaneous creativity that can sometimes happen. And I love that in the very first story, very first chapter of the Bible, is we see it. But it's not a tension, or it's not a conflict. In fact, they are living together. But the spontaneous creativity, along with a pronounced and very thorough orderliness and purpose and plan being executed. If we look at worship, before we look at worship, we need to go back and look at who is this God that we are worshiping. Because worship is going to reflect Him. And one of the greatest pictures that we have is in the creation account. One book said this about the creation account, that the creation account is not really about the creation account at all. It's about the person doing the creating. So we get lost in all the little pieces, like how many days was it, all these other things, and get lost and forget to see who this God is. And it's amazing, and hopefully you'll see this as we come through this passage, just how right this passage is in revealing to us who God is. Like you see His love and His tenderness. You see His care. You see His creativity. You see His appreciation of beauty. And yes, you see His orderliness. And so let's go through it and sort of see how we see that God is a orderly being, and then we'll move into worship should reflect that, and then we're going to move into that God goes a step further, which is that not only is He orderly, but He's ordered certain aspects of worship, how for him to be worshipped, or he's told us how he would have us worship. But look at the beginning. Because in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form, and darkness was over the face of the deep. So in the beginning, it was just God. And then the heavens and the earth are created. But notice how they're created. They're not created done, are they? He easily could have. Think about how God easily could have just said, I would like stuff, shabam. There is stuff. But he doesn't do it that way. He creates almost a work zone. He creates stuff, the earth, the heavens, and the earth. And darkness was over. And then, as the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the earth, God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light was good. God separated the light from the darkness. So in all the stuff that he created, now he starts to separate. He says, let there be light. He separates the light from the darkness. He moves on to looking at the waters. And he separates the waters. Those above and those below, calling those above heaven and those below earth. Then he further separates the waters under heaven, drawing some away to become seas and leaving land. And then he separates the and we'll go back in a second on the sprouting. But then on the fourth day, he separates the lights and sets lights in the heavens to lay out day and night. He says, and let there be for signs and for seasons and for days and years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And so as we work through this, yes, we can call it God's creation, and I think that's totally fine, but in many ways, it's God's ordering of creation. It's him putting things in place, and even in that, there's a further set of procedure. So he creates it, he separates it, and then he fills it. So you look back on each of those days, the second, the third, and the fourth days, and the fifth day, as he separates those things, he then fills them. And so he takes two things, moves them apart, and then he fills them. So like when he separates the waters from the land, creating land, what does he do then? Then he gives vegetation to grow on the land, plants yielding seed. And then he gets even more kind of orderly because he wants us to know that what? What are these plants going to do? That the plants sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed. Each according to its kind on the earth. And it goes on, the earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its own kind. That it goes out of the way of saying, like, all these things are done orderly and purposefully. The way he separates things, the way the plants that he puts in to the earth, what do they yield? Just anything? Are they going to make candy bars? No. They're going to produce seeds according to their kind. You see, there's an orderliness in all of this. And that purpose is for us to get to know God. Know when this came out. When Moses wrote Genesis, when we got to look behind the curtain of creation, in many ways Israel had no idea who this God was. Remember Moses' words when he was talking to God. He says, who am I going to say sent me? And God said, tell them, I am. I am. And so Moses didn't really have like a solid understanding of really who he was. He knows that he is I am, and he always has been, but there's a lot that he doesn't know. And so this is a great picture, one of the first pictures probably that they had of who this God was. And what do you see in this? You see this great explosion of creativity, of love, as you see how he puts mankind in the garden and gives him purpose to take care of, to steward. And then you see this order, this meticulous order going into the laying out of the world as we know it. I don't know if y'all have ever had the opportunity to work alongside someone who is a little bit more hand-skilled than you are. You know, some of us may be good at electronics, but you ever been someone that can build things? If you ever worked alongside of them, it's amazing. Just their perception of sort of how things lay out, how they fit together, all those things. And, you know, that there's those sayings, you know, measure twice, cut once. They have all these things they do, but like, it is an amazing thing to see someone create something. But it's not willy-nilly. There's a purpose for everything. There's joints for this, there's stuff for that, and it all fits together perfectly. And you see just the beauty of order and of purpose and of a line that runs through all things and sort of defining and laying out why they are the way they are. See, creation tells us a lot. But one of the main things, one of the things I think we can't lose sight of is that it gives us a great picture of who God is. That God is a God of order. We see it, and there are so many examples of this throughout the Bible. May even be, you know, to the point of you may be frustrated in some sense. But Jeremiah 29:11, God says, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans for good and not for evil." In Ephesians 2, we read, "For we are His workmanship." He put us together, created in Jesus Christ for good works, which God prepared beforehand. See, God's a bit of a pre-planner. Some of you are planners. You plan, you know, next week, you plan further down that. I talked to someone, he was planning his entire life to the end. Like he was laying it all out, getting it all together. God has him beat. God has planned all of our lives to the very minute detail. That's the type of God He is. And He's powerful enough to do it. And so as we think about God, as we think about creation as really being a picture into who this God is, that He's a God of order, that He's a God of plans, of purpose, that ought to, as that flows into us, that also ought to reflect, or that ought to be reflected in how we worship such a God. And so as we look at sort of the orderliness or why and order of worship, one of the major reasons is because we are worshiping a God of order. Now that's not all that He is. He's certainly a God of love and mercy and justice and faithfulness as well. But He's also a God of order. And that God has that He has a plan, or He even lays out how He wants to be worshipped. If you were to look in the Old Testament, you'd actually find several instances where that is laid bare. Think about Leviticus. I'm not going to make you read Leviticus, but if you look at Leviticus, what has God given the people? He's planned out their whole year. You know, like here, I'm going to be your God, and also here are all your holidays. Here are the days you can work. Here are the days you can't work. Here's what you're going to eat. Here's all these tithes. He had planned the whole thing out. There's nothing left to be planned. I mean, just the offerings, how are they being handled, the establishment of the priesthood, what they can do, what they can't do, laws of uncleanliness, when you can come into the holiest of holies, daily Day of Atonement, handling and meeting of blood, all these prohibitions, then you have the Holy Feast Week, and all these things that He'd given to Israel. Now, if you were just an Israelite and you're finding all these things out, what do you want? What are you taking away? That this is a God of order and plans. And I don't mean that in sort of the negative way. I know it's easy to hear like God of order and plans in a negative way, and that's not at all what I mean. Is that this is a God who is not doing things without thinking them through. That when God thinks about you and I, it is not willy-nilly. It is with His full mind, with His full thought behind it. and he contemplates you and his plan and his plans for us, it is a task to which he has dedicated himself. It is something that matters to him. And when you look and when you see grand plans, imagine this: you come home from I don't know if anyone's going to walk into this for Father's Day, but we come home and there's a giant party. And there's a pony. He's giving you some hints, huh, now? There's a giant party and there's a pony at the house. All right? And it's got a Spider-Man saddle. All right? That's all that. All my friends are there. And I'm trying to think of other things that could be there. There's a bouncy castle. Okay, anyway, understand, all those things are planned, they're all there. What is conveyed by that plan? One, that Hananel obviously put in the work, but two, Hananel's affection for me. See, when we look at God's handiwork, when we look at the way that he forms the world and then puts us, his image bearers, perfectly suited to live in it, when we see how he put together the ways of worship and the ways to come to him, the avenues, the means by which mankind is going to be able to communicate and relate to God himself, God lines out those streets himself. That way that his people can continue to come to him. When you see those, when you see that order, I want you to see not just order for order's sake, but that it is God breathing his love and his affection, his desire for relationship, and you knowing that if we were to put those things together, we would not come to him as we ought to, or we may not come to him at all. And so God is a God of order, and worship about that God is going to reflect that. Secondly, that God does have an opinion on how he is to be worshipped. There are a couple of instances in the Old Testament as well in the New. We'll just take one. We'll take two. In 2 Samuel, they're bringing the ark in. We read this: "And David and all the house of Israel were celebrating before the Lord with songs and lyres and harps and tambourines and castanets and cymbals. When they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah put out his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it. The oxen stumbled, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God struck him down because of his error, and he died there beside the ark. And David was angry because the Lord had broken out against Uzzah. And that place is called Perez Uzzah to this day. And David was afraid of the Lord that day. And he said, 'How can the ark of the Lord come to me?' So David was not willing to take the ark of the Lord into the city of David, but he took it aside to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite." So this instance, what's happening is the ark was stolen early on, and now they're bringing it back. And in the course of bringing it back, one thing about the ark, they've been told these are where the precious things are, including the Ten Commandments and some other stuff, the ephod and and whatnot. But no one is to touch it. It resembles and is the symbol of God's holiness. No one is to touch it under any circumstances. And so they're bringing it in, they have it on bars, and it looks like it's going to fall. And one of the men, Uzzah, sees that and puts his hands against it and immediately dies. And we have David's sort of reaction to that, and it frustrates him. It may frustrate you. Why would God kill this man when he was just trying to stabilize that? And so he decides to not bring it in. God has other things, when we look at Saul, when he offered offerings against God's will. There are aspects of God's worship that we're going to find grating and hard. And the reason about that is because we are coming to a holy God, and it is very easy for us to forget that. And so God has put into place certain things in worship